Hello, my name is Luna. And for a while, I genuinely believed my story had ended the day I lost Mark. 39 years of love, of laughter echoing in the hallway, of quiet breakfasts and shared books, gone in a heartbeat. One moment, I was folding his sweater and humming along to an old James Taylor song. The next, I was holding onto the side of a hospital bed, listening to the cold hum of a heart monitor that would never beat again. We had built our life in a small cedarwood house just outside Asheville, North Carolina. Nothing fancy, just a cozy, two-bedroom home that smelled like coffee in the morning and firewood at night. Mark planted sunflowers every spring, and I'd knit by the window with a cup of Earl Grey. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And after he passed, it felt cavernous. Every creak in the floorboard sounded like him walking toward me. Every morning, I'd wake up, and for a split second, I'd forget. And then the silence would hit me like a wave. Grief isn't just sadness, it's disorientation. It's reaching for a voice that's no longer there. It's wondering who you are now that no one's calling you honey, or warming your tea when you forget about it. My daughter, Samantha, everyone calls her Sam, started calling me every day after the funeral. She lives in Boise, Idaho, with her husband Ryan and their two kids, Chloe and Max. Sam is a planner. Always has been. Practical. Sharp. Just like her father used to be. She was already talking logistics while I was still folding Mark's sweaters into boxes. Mom, you can't stay in that house. It's too big for you. It's not safe to live alone. You should sell and move in with us. At first, I resisted. I told her I was fine. Of course, I wasn't. Loneliness has a way of convincing you that silence is safer than change. But Sam was persistent. You'll be around family, she said. You'll have the kids, the holidays, the noise. It'll feel alive again. She painted it like a blessing. And maybe it was. After the third call, after the third night of staring at Mark's empty recliner until midnight, I caved. I listed the house. And to my surprise, it sold in less than a week. The market was hot. And apparently, so was my little sunlit corner of North Carolina. $380,000. That's what they gave me for the life Mark and I built board by board. I packed up what was left of our years into 12 boxes. I kept Mark's old rocking chair and the mahogany dresser that once belonged to my mother. The rest, donated. Sold. Or left behind with whispered goodbyes. Then I flew to Idaho. Boise was colder than I remembered. Colder in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. Sam and Ryan greeted me with open arms. Their two-story home in the suburbs was spacious, modern, and humming with the chaos of young family life. They had turned Ryan's old study into a makeshift bedroom for me. You won't have to deal with stairs this way, Sam said. She meant well, but I couldn't help feeling tucked away. At 61, I was still healthy, still strong. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I had been relocated, not invited. And so began my new chapter. Not with a bang, but with a quiet, uneasy breath. I had stepped into a new house, but I hadn't yet found my place in it. Little did I know, everything was about to change. The first few weeks in Boise were polite. That's the best way I can describe it. Sam and Ryan tried their best to make me feel welcome. Chloe, my 13-year-old granddaughter, I would sit with me sometimes while I knitted or cooked. Max, 11 and full of energy, liked having someone new to tell his ridiculous jokes to. They gave me the downstairs room, the one that used to be Ryan's office converted into a bedroom with a twin bed. A desk. and a sliding door that looked out onto the backyard. The space was comfortable, efficient, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was a long-term house guest in someone else's life. Still, I did what mothers and grandmothers have always done. I tried to help. I cooked dinner, picked up the kids from school when I could, cleaned around the house, and offered to do the grocery shopping. I wanted to make myself useful, to show them I wasn't just an old woman taking up space. At first, Sam appreciated it. Or at least, she said she did. But soon, things began to shift. Quietly, almost invisibly, I started noticing the way Ryan would go silent when I walked into the room. The way Sam's jaw would tighten when I asked if I could help prepare dinner. "Mom, I've already meal prepped for the week," she'd say with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You should just relax." But the truth is, I didn't want to relax. I'd been active all my life. Inactivity made me feel useless. And being told to rest felt like being told to step aside. One evening, about 2 months in, Sam came home beaming with news. Ryan got a promotion. She announced over dinner. "We're hosting a little celebration this Saturday, just a few colleagues coming over." "That's wonderful," I said, truly happy for them. "What can I do to help?" Sam hesitated. "Actually, Mom, maybe it would be better if you visited your friend Muriel that day. So the house isn't too crowded." Muriel was the only person I remotely knew in Boise, a retired colleague of Sam's I'd met for coffee a few times. Not exactly someone I'd call a friend. Still, I nodded. "Sure, I'll give her a call." That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself, am I in the way? I had sold my home, my history, my quiet sanctuary in Asheville. And now here I was feeling like an accessory in someone else's well-curated life. The following days confirmed what my gut had already begun to suspect. Ryan grew more irritable. One evening, he snapped at me over a missing remote. "Didn't I ask you not to move my things?" he hissed. I hadn't touched it. But I apologized anyway. Embarrassed. Sam, meanwhile, shifted from helpful to patronizing. She started commenting on what I wore, how much salt I used, even how often I watched television. One morning, she said, "That cardigan makes you look tired." "Mom, why don't you wear the blue one I gave you for Christmas?" I changed without a word. But something inside me dimmed a little. Then came the issue of money. Sam began bringing up the utility bills more often, how water and electricity costs had gone up since I moved in. I offered to help. Of course. She agreed quickly. I started transferring a monthly amount I felt was fair. But that didn't stop the comments. Soon, she was asking about my savings. "Are you still receiving Dad's pension?" she asked over breakfast one day. "Yes. Part of it passed to me after he died," I replied. "And how much is that?" "If you don't mind me asking." I did mind. But I didn't say so. Mark always believed that finances were a private matter, and I had always agreed. But in that moment, I realized something quietly devastating. My presence here wasn't about family. It was about calculation. And I was no longer sure I had made the right choice. It happened on a Thursday. The kind of quiet, forgettable Thursday, where nothing seems urgent until everything is. I was in the kitchen, reading a mystery novel and sipping chamomile tea, when Ryan stormed in, muttering something about the television remote again. "I swear I left it right here," he snapped, lifting a pillow on the couch. "It's on the coffee table," I said gently, pointing to it without lifting my eyes from the book. He turned, grabbed it, and stared at me. I told you not to move my things. I didn't. I said, meeting his glare. It's been there since lunch. He clenched his jaw, paused, and walked out without another word. That night at dinner, the tension was thick enough to cut with a butter knife. Chloe chewed quietly. Max barely touched his food. And Ryan was glued to his phone. Sam, always the buffer, tried small talk. I offered compliments on the meal, but it was clear something was unraveling. When I reached to take Ryan's plate, my elbow knocked his wine glass. The red liquid splashed across the white tablecloth and down onto his beige slacks. Damn it, he barked, jumping up. I'm so sorry, I gasped, grabbing a napkin. Don't touch it, he shouted, slapping my hand away. You'll just make it worse. Sam rushed in, pulling him toward the hallway. Go change. Ryan, I'll take care of it, she said quickly. It's not a big deal. But his glare stayed with me even after he left the room. I stood there, napkin still in hand, my fingers tingling where he'd pushed them away. I'm sorry, Mom, Sam said quietly. He just bought those pants last week. He's been really stressed at work. I nodded, numb. I'll pay for dry cleaning, I murmured. Or I can buy a new pair. No need. She waved off. I'll take care of it. As I cleaned up the broken glass and wine, my hand trembled. One shard nicked my finger. A single drop of blood fell onto the tablecloth right next to the wine stain. Mom, be careful. Sam rushed back. You're going to hurt yourself. I'm fine, I said through clenched teeth. It's just a glass. No. Really? Let me do it. Please. I stepped back. I had no fight left in me. But inside, something cracked. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Where was the daughter who used to braid flowers into my hair in the spring? Who'd crawl into my lap with a blanket and a book, begging for one more bedtime story? What happened to the bond we once had? I decided to try again. The next morning, I woke early and tiptoed into the kitchen. I was going to make pancakes Max's favorite since he was 5. Maybe, just maybe, a warm breakfast could thaw the cold. But when I got there, Sam was already by the coffee maker, dressed in a tailored navy suit, typing something on her phone. Good morning, I said, trying to sound cheerful. I thought I'd make pancakes for breakfast. She didn't turn around. No need. Mom, the kids are having cereal. Ryan and I don't eat in the mornings. I hesitated. But Max loves, she turned then. And her face stopped me cold. Not angry. Not rushed. Just exhausted. And something else? Bitterness. Mom, she said, quietly but firmly. Please, let us live our lives. I stood still. We were fine before you moved in. We'll manage somehow. It felt like someone had pulled the floor out from beneath me. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. I just wanted to help. But you are interfering, she said, her voice rising. With your advice. Your routines. Your pancakes. This isn't your house. It's mine. And in that moment, something inside me finally broke. I didn't cry. Not then. Not in front of her. I simply turned and walked out of the kitchen. Back to my room. If you could even call it my room. I closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall. I could still hear Sam making coffee. the clinking of the spoon against her mug. As if nothing had happened. I felt humiliated. Not by the words themselves, but by the truth behind them. This wasn't my home. And I was no longer her safe place, just a burden with a pension. I lay awake most of that night, tossing, turning, remembering. Mark used to say I had the softest hands. Even after years of chalk dust and gardening soil. "You're tougher than you look," he'd whisper on days when I felt small. Where was that woman now? Around 3 a.m., I got out of bed, wrapped a cardigan around my shoulders, and crept into the kitchen. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock above the sink. I made tea, Saturday at the table, and thought, I didn't want to run. I didn't want revenge. But I also couldn't stay. Somewhere between sips, a strange thought came over me. Not sorrow, but clarity. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't broke. I wasn't trapped. I had options. I had choices. I just hadn't claimed them yet. The next morning, I pulled out a notepad from my dresser and wrote down everything I could remember about my finances. I'd sold the Asheville house for nearly $380. Ling. After taxes and closing fees, I'd walked away with about $340. Ling. I had Mark's life insurance another $200. Zero and my monthly pension. I'd never added it all up before. But when I did, my breath caught. I wasn't rich, but I was far from helpless. What was I doing here, tiptoeing in someone else's home? Defending myself over breakfast cereal and pancake batter when I could be living on my own terms. That afternoon, I called Linda McAllister, the attorney who'd handled Mark's affairs after he passed. She'd always spoken to me with warmth and clarity. Never like I was. Just some confused old widow. Her secretary scheduled me for the next morning. But I couldn't let Sam know. Not yet. I left a note on the counter. Gone for a walk. Be back later. Mom. Then I grabbed my tote bag, stepped outside, and walked towards something I hadn't felt in months possibility. The air was crisp. The sky that peculiar shade of Idaho blue that looks painted on. As I walked through the neighborhood, something loosened inside me. Every step away from the house felt lighter. I stopped at a little cafe near downtown Maple, Birch. I think it was called, and ordered a black coffee. No sugar. No cream. Just like Mark used to make it. Then I opened my phone and pulled up the banking app. Numbers. Rows. Accounts. Balances. I stared at the total and whispered to myself, "You're not stuck. You're scared. There's a difference." And I was finally ready to cross that line. After coffee, I walked 2 blocks down to Idaho Bank and Trust and asked to speak with an advisor. A young man, probably no older than Max would be in 10 years, walked me through my options. He talked about certificates of deposit, conservative portfolios, long-term planning. I listened carefully but made no commitments. Before I left, I asked him something I hadn't said out loud yet. Can anyone else see these accounts? My daughter, for example. He smiled politely. No, ma'am. Unless you've given them explicit access. Everything remains confidential. Good. As I walked out of the bank, I felt taller. It wasn't freedom yet, but it was a plan. The next few weeks passed in a strange duality. By day, while Sam and Ryan were at work and the kids were in school, I built a quiet revolution. And by night, I played the part of the invisible house guest, the helpful grandmother, the compliant mother, the non-interfering woman who kept her head down and mouth shut. No one suspected a thing. I had appointments with Linda McAllister to revise my will. I had follow-up meetings with the bank. I even started browsing apartment listings around Boise and Meridian, places that were small but full of charm. Some had gardens. One had a balcony that faced the sunrise. But I didn't rush. I had to be smart. Strategic. I also found a job. There was a little shop in the downtown historic district called Page and Vine. A used bookstore tucked between a florist and an art supply store. The window was full of dusty leather-bound novels, old postcards, and a handwritten sign that said, "Help Wanted." Must love stories. I walked in. The man behind the counter, Mr. Al Dobson, looked like he'd stepped out of a Hemingway novel. Wire-rimmed glasses, tweed vest, coffee-stained fingers. We talked for almost an hour about books. About Mark. About how people don't collect stories anymore. They just scroll through them. At the end of our conversation, he smiled and said, "You're hired. 3 days a week. Flexible hours. But I warn you, I pay more in books than dollars." "Sounds perfect," I said. And I meant it. Linda finished my will 2 days later. I left $25. $0 each for Chloe and Max. But with a clause, they could only access it when they turned 25, and only for education or a first home. The rest, close to $500,000, would go to the Boise Public Library Foundation and a non-profit for Alzheimer's research. In memory of my mother. As for Sam, $10. Ling. A final gesture. Enough to say I hadn't forgotten her, but not enough to let her forget how she'd treated me. Linda had the document notarized, sealed, and stored. "No one has the right to see this without your permission," she reassured me. And that was all I needed to hear. I began preparing for the move quietly. I found a cozy 2-bedroom apartment in the North End, full of old wood floors, crown molding, and light that poured in like honey in the afternoon. The landlord, Mr. Henry Wells, was a retired teacher who lived downstairs and reminded me a little of Mark. He told me his daughter used to live there before she got married and moved to Oregon. "This place has good memories," he said, handing me the key. "I hope you'll make more of your own." I smiled. That's exactly the plan. I arranged for movers. Just a few essentials books, clothes, my knitting, and Mark's old rocking chair. I didn't want to take more than I needed. I wasn't running away. I was stepping into something new. The timing worked out perfectly. Sam and Ryan were taking the kids to Sunday Valley for a weekend ski trip. They'd be gone for 2 nights. Enough time to pack, move, and disappear without confrontation, without drama. That Friday morning, I waved them off from the porch. Wearing my best, everything's fine, smile. Then I walked back inside, closed the door, and exhaled. I packed in silence, box by box, piece by piece. Not just things but memories. By sunset, the room was empty. Not sad, not haunted, just ready. I left 2 envelopes on the kitchen counter. One addressed to Sam, one addressed to Chloe and Max. And then I walked out with my tote bag, my dignity, and the quiet conviction that this was the first decision in years I had made entirely for me. The first night in my new apartment was quiet. Not the kind of silence that haunts you, but the kind that soothes. A soft hush broken only by the ticking of an old wall clock, the occasional hum of traffic outside, and the rustling of leaves through a cracked window. I couldn't sleep at first. Not because I was scared, but because I wasn't. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was tiptoeing through someone else's world. No one asked why I left the light on. No one questioned what I was watching on television. No one told me what to eat, what to wear, or how much water I was using. This space small, sunlit, and a little worn around the edges was mine. Completely mine. The next morning, I made myself a real breakfast. Pancakes. With blueberries. For no one but me. Then I unpacked. I hung photos of Mark and me at the Grand Canyon. Chloe's macaroni art from when she was 5. I placed the mahogany dresser by the window and set up my knitting basket beside the old rocking chair. By lunchtime, the apartment felt less like a stranger's and more like a story I was starting to write. I turned off my phone. I wasn't ready for Sam's voice. Not yet. She'd call. I knew that. She'd demand explanations. Throw accusations. Maybe even cry. But I needed time not to run, but to breathe. That Saturday, as I watered the lavender plant I'd picked up from the farmer's market, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find Chloe sitting on the steps, hugging her backpack. "Grandma," she said, leaping up and hugging me like her whole body needed it. "Chloe, how did you find me? You left your address in our envelope," she said. "I told Mom I was going to Emma's to study." "You lied." I raised an eyebrow. Half amused. "A little," she admitted, her eyes downcast. "But I had to see you. Mom's really mad. She says you were selfish. But I just wanted to know if you were okay." I held the door open. "Come in." "Sweetheart, let me show you around." We walked through the apartment, her fingers trailing across bookshelves, her eyes lighting up at the art on the walls. "It's so cozy," she said, flopping onto the couch. "It's not like our house at all." "What do you mean?" "Ours is all white and stainless steel and Google Hubs. But this," she smiled. "This feels like you." We drank tea. Ate cookies I had baked the night before. She told me about school. About Max being grumpy. About how Sam wouldn't stop pacing the house. Then she asked the question I had been waiting for. "Grandma, are you really not coming back?" I took a breath. "No. Honey, I'm not. This place, it's better for me. But that doesn't mean you can't visit. Anytime. Max, too. If he wants to. He won't come," she said quietly. "He's mad. He thinks you betrayed the family." I nodded. "Maybe he'll understand one day. Maybe not. But I'll always be here." Before she left, she asked me something that hit deeper than I expected. "Do you miss us?" I knelt down and hugged her tight. Every single day. But sometimes loving people means giving them space. And giving yourself peace. She held on to me longer than usual. As I watched her walk down the sidewalk, backpack bouncing with each step, I realized something. Even if everything else fell apart, this child still saw me. Not as a burden. Not as a bank account. But as someone who mattered. And that was enough to keep going. The messages started coming the very next morning. 3 voicemails. All from Sam. The first one was calm. Almost sweet. "Mom, please call me back. We need to talk." The second one was sharper. "I know you're getting these. This isn't funny. You can't just disappear." And the third, it was the voice I had feared, but also expected. "You went to Lorraine McAllister. What are you up to? We're a family. We should discuss these things together." I didn't respond. Instead, I sat on the porch of my little apartment, watching the sprinklers across the courtyard, missed the grass like tiny silver ribbons in the morning sun. Family. That word had always meant something sacred to me. Something warm and whole and full of safety. But now it felt like a negotiation tactic. 2 days later, Muriel, Sam's old colleague, called. I ran into your daughter. Luna, she said carefully. Well, she's been asking about you. I figured, I said, sipping my tea. She said she went to your lawyer. Tried to find out what you changed in the will. Did Lorraine say anything? No? Just told her it was confidential. But Luna was furious. Said you'd disinherited the family. I was silent for a moment. Did you? Muriel asked. Gently. I changed the will, I said. But not out of spite. Out of necessity. There was a pause on the line. Well, Muriel said finally. You sound more alive than I've heard you in months. I smiled. Because I am. That same afternoon, I started my new job at Page & Vine. Mr. Dobson handed me a navy apron, showed me how to ring up a sale, and pointed to a stack of poetry books that needed sorting. Take your time, he said. No rush. Just love the books. I loved them already. There was something peaceful about touching stories older than your own. Something grounding about finding a forgotten note scribbled in the margin of a 1923 copy of Leaves of Grass. It reminded me that everyone has a voice, and mine wasn't done speaking yet. A week later, I saw Sam again. Not by choice. I was at the farmer's market picking out strawberries when her voice sliced through the air behind me. There you are. I turned around slowly. She looked tired, eyes puffy. Hair thrown into a loose bun. Lips pressed into a line that looked more like defeat than fury. Hi, Sam, I said, setting down a carton. That's all you have to say after everything. What would you like me to say? That you're sorry. That you'll come home. That you'll stop? Whatever this is. This, I said gently, is called a life. She blinked. You changed your will. Yes. And cut us out. No. I just rewrote the story. One where I'm no longer an afterthought. I invited you into our home, she snapped, and then made me feel like I didn't belong. We stood there in silence, surrounded by baskets of peaches and ears of corn. No one looked. No one interrupted. It was just a mother and a daughter, speaking truths neither had dared say for years. You betrayed me, she whispered. No, I said softly. I finally chose me. She didn't argue. She just stared at me, as if seeing me for the first time. And maybe, just maybe, she was